seminary students that come and talk to me about their struggles with pornography. And one of the things I want to say is that our sexuality is so closely related to our spirituality. That's one reason why I think so many of us have struggled with that and still struggle with that. So we need to be aware that sometimes pornography use goes up as a result of stress, if that particularly is a habit that we've been accustomed to prior to COVID. And so as a coronavirus continues to spread globally, social distancing, self-isolation, quarantining, the national lockdowns have become cores to the control of the pandemic. However, these measures may also lead to increases in social isolation and loneliness and stress, which can then predict an increase in the use of pornography. Let's go on. Okay, so other stress or pain-related addictions. Again, this is just an inventory. Now, how many of us are shopping compulsively? How many of us tend to control our world or try to control other people to keep ourselves feeling less stressed or safe? How many of us gamble compulsively, or even need to be in relationships compulsively to make ourselves feel less stressed or better about ourselves? Or how many of us avoid conflict, withdrawal, as has been talked about? Or how many of us oversleep? Or how many of us engage in things like codependency to deal with our stress? So there are many, many types of addictions, and the same questions apply to all. Am I using them in unhealthy ways? So let's go on. So what is the essence of addiction? So Dr. Gerald May, a Christian psychiatrist, said this: addiction is a search for connection or relationship that's meant to be filled by God himself. God created our hearts, an empty place in our heart that can be filled, was meant to be filled only by himself. But when I try to fill that with something else, then I can fall into addictive patterns. So people try to avoid or eliminate pain through the use of their addictions or other dysfunctional dynamics. So this is what Dr. Terry Wardle says in a book called Healing Care, Healing Prayer. So we try to avoid or eliminate pain through our addictions. So I want to ask just 4 quick questions for us to consider. Do I engage in more of an emotional or behavioral response to stress that I'm comfortable with at times? Have I hurt myself or others with my emotional or behavioral responses to stress? Have others expressed concern about the frequency or intensity of my emotional or behavioral responses? Have people talked to you about that? Because remember, when it comes to addiction, we tend to experience denial about that. And often we need other people to be a mirror for us. And finally, have I tried decreasing or stopping my use of emotional or behavioral responses to stress, but without success? In other words, I said, I'm not going to do that, but I find myself doing it anyway. Those are indicators that perhaps you have crossed the line into addiction. So finally, the last slide, what are some of the things that we can do about that? So first of all, acknowledge the truth about my story. Don't try to run from it, deny it. This is the truth. That's the first step of recovery, admitting our powerlessness and unmanageability. But second, embrace and face the pain, the stress that I'm experiencing. Instead of running from it, nope, stop. I'm facing it and I'm allowing myself to feel it. But then check out step number 3. Let myself experience the personal ministry of comfort that comes from Jesus himself. Become self-aware and learn healthy coping mechanisms rather than dysfunctional ones. If needed, begin the journey of recovery. Perhaps a 12-step program like our church's 12-step program called Journey to Wholeness, which is a Christ-centered 12-step program. And if more is needed, seek professional counseling perhaps detoxification, residential or hospital-based treatment for your addiction, and maybe engaged in a 6 months to 1 year aftercare program. So I'm done now. Back to Debbie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sidlogic. You know, something that you said just really kind of struck me, that you said that all of us are addicts to something and we just don't recognize it. Can you just talk about that just a little bit more? Because I mean, I don't think I'm addicted to anything. Maybe not. An occasional cupcake, is that an addiction? Well, it might be, but that a little bit. How do I know if I'm addicted to something?
So here's a question to ask. Do I need something or someone outside of myself to make myself whole? You know, to feel good about myself, you know? And by the way, that includes God. Some people are addicted to religiosity rather than a living, vibrant, personal, dynamic, loving, in love relationship with God.
Okay.
You know, and so I would suggest that if nothing else, most of us, if we're honest, are addicted to ourselves. You know, we're the center of our world rather than having God be the center of our world, and moving from that paradigm to really having God be the center of our world, I think, is one of the things I'm referring to.
And I know you talked about some self-assessment types of things, but how do I figure out if my coping mechanisms are healthy or unhealthy? You know, I don't think what I'm doing is dysfunctional. I don't think my cupcake addiction is really a dysfunctional addiction. But how do I know if it's healthy or unhealthy?
Well, I know for me that there's someone who loves me dearly called the Holy Spirit. And he has this way of kind of whispering into my ear, David, are you eating too many sweets these days? You know, is that good for your body or not? You know, if no one else, I know that the Holy Spirit always has this way, if I'm open and sensitive to him, of asking me those kinds of questions that make me stop and think about whether what I'm doing is really good. But, you know, is it compulsive? You know, do I have a hard time saying no? And if I do say no, am I able to live by that no? Or not, you know? Those are some indicators.
Okay. How do you feel about, you know, for example, you talked about a media addiction, you know, 60% increase in video content, especially with COVID. We're engaging in kind of media right now. How do you feel about media fast or taking breaks from different types of either social media, or do you feel that that's helpful for us?
Well, you know, I think it can be. But the reality, Debbie, is that, you know, all my students, they can't.
Yeah, they can't,
you know,
right.
They have to be on media, you know, it's kind of hard to sort all of that out. But I think for many of us, you know, taking a break, you know, there was this program last night talking about little children who are in school, you know, getting all their classes on media, and they're getting headaches because of eye strain.
Eye strain, right.
And one of the things the doctors recommended is take a break from that. You know, if you have to be on media for 10 or 15 minutes, then stop and get off for a few minutes, give your eyes a rest, and then maybe go back. I mean, that's kind of a mini media break, but I think for some of us, maybe a longer one might be good too.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. We'll be coming back to you with more tips here as we move along in our program. We're going to now move ahead to our next presenter. Dr. Sandria Nixon is going to be talking with us about stress and COVID, a very real and present situation right now. Thank you so much, Dr. Nixon. When you talk to us about your experience with COVID, we know that you're there in the front lines of what's happening, so thank you.
Well, thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure being here, and I thank Judy and everyone who's you know, put this program together. Just a little bit about myself. I've been a nurse for many years, and then I became an advanced practice nurse, and I've been a family practice nurse now for about 20 years. And I do cover from birth to end of life. And currently I'm working with visiting physicians associations where I'm seeing patients virtually and also in their homes. So I am really faced with, a lot of what the COVID stress is. What's being shown right now is a book that I studied through while I was preparing. And this is a book I bought from the author. She actually presented the presentation on stress and how to deal with it. And she actually autographed it for my daughter and myself. So it's quite special. So I'm not going to take a long time. A lot of what I wanted to say has been already said. So I'm thankful for that. Margaret talks about in her book, the 10 ways to handle and stress and to shift from the problems to the possibility. And one of the main things Dr. Weinberg speaks of is the destructive nature of stress, albeit the silent killer. And we've said that before. Well, why is it so? We experience stress, obviously, has been said many times in our lives. It's a part of our work, our home, our school, our routines. The problem becomes when we have stress issues that are chronic. And of course, it was discussed earlier that when it's chronic and you have the release of adrenaline and cortisol, and it leads to many kinds of diseases, such as hypertension, heart disease, cardiac disease, and also the new one now that I'm hearing a lot about is inflammation. Inflammation is a big deal. And as we've said, just a quick review, there's an alarm, the brain goes off, the hypothalamus gives you the fight or flight response with the release of adrenaline and cortisol. Now that can happen in a happy situation, but it's over and it's done. But when we have chronic issues of constant situations like COVID-19, so my portion is to discuss the stress and COVID-19, what's related to it. It's added certainly extra layer of the stress, and quite frankly, it's dominated our thinking, and of course with good reasons. One of the things that I'll tell you about the stress and COVID is the confusion in the media, right? We have to think about the conspiracy theories that we touched on the last time, and is there a chip that's being injected into me? And I chuckle because folks are being fed a lot of these things from reputable sources. So that's why I bring it up again. And it's should I get it? Is it safe? We have not had enough time to really see. Usually we have many years where we deal with getting a vaccine to market. But as I mentioned in the last program that we had, a lot of these different particles were already studied for many years. And so it was just a matter of putting them together by a very brilliant scientist who happens to be African American, and she came to Andrews. The other thing is COVID-19 stress. The folks on the front line, like I am, such as the fear of contracting COVID. Sometimes we get lost in the shuffle a little bit. We have families and we have children and we have lives as well. And many in the medical profession are now thinking about leaving. The Chronicle on Higher Education published recently that half of the people that they surveyed were considering changing careers or early retirement. And that, while I understand that, it somewhat saddens me, because if we're not there to take care of the patients, then who's going to do it? And as I've said, many of the reasons are, being on the front line, the chronic exhaustion, burnout, and often lack of support. Now we're getting better. It's getting better. PPE is available and so forth, and we're getting the vaccines into people's arms. So the fear is lessening, but it's actually still there, the stress, because you still have a certain sect of the population who are not masking, and they're feeling they've made it into something other than a health issue. So there's that stress also for those of us who have listened to the science and listened to Dr. Fauci and some other scientists, and believe that of the 500,000 plus people who have died, had they had this vaccine, would have certainly, without question, taken it. Some of the other things for us to consider with COVID-19 and stress is that, this, with schools being closed and parents, some not having the ability to stay home. They have to go to work and they have children, and the schools are closed. What do I do with my children? How do they learn? So these are some real hard, stressful issues that parents and families have had to deal with. And then those who are fortunate or unfortunate enough to be home, they're working still, and they also have to become teachers. And so it has been, quite a difficult situation. And is it going away soon? We hope, but there's still quite a number of people who are not going to get the vaccine, at least not now. They're saying that they still have to see it. And one of the things that's causing stress also is, we know that we have the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine, where it was a 2-shot system. Now we have the Johnson & Johnson, which is a 1-shot. And some folks are now saying, demanding, well, I don't want this one, I want this one. And the scientists are saying it doesn't matter what you get, just get it in your arm. The 1-shot, folks believe, because it's not 2, it's not as efficacious. And from my reading and from what I have heard and read, it is over 70 to 75% effective. It will keep you from A, dying, and B, becoming severely ill. And they're also thinking about a second booster for that one as well. So don't go in demanding, I want the Pfizer or the Moderna, I don't want that 1-shot thing. You just be grateful and just get it in your arm. Now, there is the other one that you've been hearing about lately in the media, the AstraZeneca, and this is the one, I think it's Germany and Norway and some other places, where 3 people have died because of something in the vaccine, a rare antibody, I have it written down here, where it has caused some blood clots. And so what they're saying is they're actually still using it, but they're informing folks that after the vaccine, if they experience anything like a headache, or if they experience any dizziness and so forth, to get help right away. Another good thing, well, one of the good things now that I'm going to speak about is it is getting better to get the vaccine. So that's causing a little bit less stress. Pharmacies are now giving it. The age range has been lowered, and they're rolling out the 1-shot Johnson & Johnson. So that these things are good. One of the main things working in the setting that I am now is that I see a lot of elderly patients who are immobile and they cannot get out to get the vaccine. We have in our company, we have applied for it. It's a big step system, and it's still a lottery as to who will get it. What better way, is there than to actually bring the vaccine into the home of an immobile or elderly or, patient who just cannot get to the pharmacy or get to an injection site. So that's another big area that, no one really talks about. And we're hoping that we can be the conduit there to help. I'm pretty much done here until we ask questions, but I just wanted, to let everyone know that it's hard. Forgive me for doing this. I didn't set up my computer really well. So, but in any event, I just wanted to let you all know that COVID-19 and the additional stress that we've had on top of all the other stresses that we deal with in our lives can only be, helped and mitigated by our faith system, trusting in God, praying, and from one day to the next, just taking it one day at a time, actually, is what I need to say. Debbie?
Thank you so much, Dr. Nixon. Something you said early on in your presentation there caught my ear, and I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about inflammation and stress.
Yes.
Just help us understand a little bit more about what that inflammation or how stress contributes to inflammation. I'm not sure what that means. Help me understand a little bit.
Yeah. So I first heard the term from my primary care physician, and she says, every disease is caused by inflammation. And so what it is when you do not eat the right foods, per se, like a diet that's overrun with sugar, and you're not eating the greens as was told earlier. Those the bad diet somehow creates inflammation in the tissues,
Okay.
and where it leads to in the blood vessels, and where it leads to hypertension. It leads to gut syndromes. I've even heard diabetes. So it is a big deal. I would say everyone look it up. It's yeah, it's a big, even in depression they're looking at that too.
And inflammation.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. When we think about COVID and stress and COVID, I know one thing that stresses me often are people that are COVID deniers or COVID dismissers or COVID relaxed. I don't really care about COVID type of things.
Right.
What do you say to those people? I'm sure you come across them in your work where they're
Right.
just think it's just, yeah, I don't wear a mask. I don't need to, whatever. It's just the flu. I don't know what people are making such a big deal about.
Yes. You saying, how do I handle that?
How do you handle those conversations and how do you process that stress?
Yes, it's stressful for me. However, unless it's mandated, there's not much I can do about it. For me personally, when I'm out in the supermarket and I feel that I have a sense of right to be protected, and I see someone without a mask, I simply go down the next aisle. I don't know if you've sneezed or so forth. When you're in an office setting, the pace is really set by the manager or the culture. So I make sure I stay protected. I can't very well tell someone else, you really need to. I try to and I demonstrate by modeling, but when it's not, when they don't see it from a health perspective and maybe from a political perspective, I'm staying out of that. I'm going to stay out of that. I can just lead by example, and if asked, I give my opinion. Yes.
Yeah. And so, what are you telling your patients when that comes up?
Okay, so with my patients, I really advise them to still wear a mask. Some of them are, double vaccinated or they're, one, and I tell them that even though I've been vaccinated and I'm about, oh, I don't know, 2 or 3 months out, two months out now, probably, or maybe a little less, I still wear a mask. When I see them, I still put a shield on. Why? Because they're variants that we don't
Sure.
know too much about yet. And so those variants, I could still get the COVID virus, I could still get the coronavirus,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't get as sick. At least that's what the science is saying. I would not get quite as sick, but I can pass it on to you. And you, without protection or the vaccine, can get very ill. And that's the last thing I would want to do. So I protect myself and them, even if they do not want to.
Okay. Okay. And just one more question for you, Dr. Nixon. You mentioned the stress that healthcare professionals are going through right now. And I would say most of us know a healthcare professional. Not everyone, but most of us. And so how could the average person help support those healthcare professionals on the front lines? So I'm not a healthcare professional, but is there something that I can do to be helpful that may mitigate so not just for me, but I could mitigate somebody else's stress a little bit?
That's an excellent question. Thank you, Debbie. No one really asks health professionals what they can do. They just, we just go and we tough it out and we do what we do. I would say give a call, but sometimes our days are 12 hours. And I would say not feel left out if I can't return your call. And I would just say, a text, I'm thinking about you, I said a prayer this morning, have a great day. Or, I am not opposed to dropping off a basket of fruit.
Yes, ma'am. Fruit it is. For all those watching, Dr. Nixon would like a basket of fruit dropped off at her doorstep.
Exactly. I have to increase my immune system. Thank you.
I did ask. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Nixon. We really appreciate your service and working on the front lines and helping us. We'll be coming back to you here in just a moment as we talk about some tips and some things that we can do. We're going to do some question and answer right now, and we're going to ask Dr. Judith Fisher and Dr. Carol Wolford Hunt. They will both be joining our Q&A as well. And I'm not going to check and see if we've got any questions yet in the chat, but we don't have any questions. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to start with let's go with Dr. Fisher. If you'll just give us a couple of your top tips for managing stress in our lives, and then we'll go to Dr. Wolford Hunt and move to our other presenters. So Dr. Fisher, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and just give us a few tips that you use and you share with your clients and patients about managing stress.
Sure, thank you. Welcome. I'm glad I'm here with you this afternoon. I serve as director of the Counseling and Testing Center here at Andrews University and have been here for quite a number of years. I'm also an educator and a clinical supervisor. And we also see patients out in the community, focusing on health and focusing on helping people to be in a better place. And the topic of stress is quite an important one for us. And this afternoon, I'm glad that we're talking about that. I'm going to go to the tip in a minute or so, but I just wanted to go back to the information. And this is something that's really serious, guys. And the idea is to realize that God created our bodies in a way that it's meant for healing. Our bodies are created so that when something happens, things triggered in the brain and the body promote healing. And so inflammation occurs when, for example, some things are set up in the body that somehow threaten to destroy the body. And so the white blood cells come in and they try to protect the body, just like, for example, when you get a cut in your hand and after a while or in your finger, you notice that there's a little bit of inflammation there. There's inflammation that happens internally as well when certain things are threatening the internal body. And so the more we put in things in our body that will threaten the well-being of the body, the more we get inflammation, whether it is psychological, whether it is physiological. So when there is stress, and of course the white blood cells respond trying to protect the body, then there's inflammation. Sometimes the immune system itself will produce or promote the stress as well. And so what we do see is a reduction in our immune system, and we become more vulnerable to illnesses. And here we're talking about chronic stress. So again, very quickly, when we're thinking about the chronic stress system, there is what many of us refer to as the fight or flight, and we've heard about it. It's really associated with the sympathetic nervous system. And then we have the parasympathetic nervous system. With the sympathetic nervous system, this is the fight or flight. This is where, if something happens and we feel threatened, and then of course our bodies come together, our organs come together to help us to survive. The parasympathetic nervous system is associated with the repairing of the body, the rest and sleep, and all the good things that help us to literally get our bodies back to our normal and healthy selves. So when we're spending a whole lot more time on that end, when we are, for example, the stress hormones, such as, many of those stress hormones are building up and they keep us on that end, then our bodies don't get a chance to heal. Our bodies don't get a chance to repair. And that's one of the reasons for which we find ourselves more susceptible or more vulnerable to illnesses, especially when the chronic stress continues and it does not stop. Well, talking about tips, there's lots of stuff out there.
Yeah.
I'd like you to remind you of the fact that there's a very simple statement, and it goes like this: a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Yeah.
So one of the things that help me to feel less stress is to remember that I don't have to do it all at the same time. Typically, when I look at the things that I have to do and it becomes very overwhelming, then it increases my stress level. So what I do is I break it down into small pieces, one thing at a time, one step at a time. And I'm finding out that if I'm able to do one step at a time, I end up getting to where I want to go. However, it takes me a little bit of time, but it allows me to do so with less stress. So that's one of the things that I do. There are lots more things, but maybe someone else may want to share, and maybe I'll come back and share a little bit later on.
All right, thank you. Yes, I will hear from our presenters now. Thank you so much, Dr. Fisher. So we'll welcome Dr. Carol Wilford Hunt, who's also with us today. And Dr. Wilford Hunt, hello, good to see you. And if you would just share with us a little about your work, and then just give us some of your thoughts as we talk about stress here today.
Well, thank you for having me, and good to see you, Debbie. Let me see. I am the chair of the Counseling, Psychology and Educational Psychology Department at Andrews. And so in my work, I work with students who are training to be counselors and psychologists. And so you can imagine the issues of stress are dealt with not just about how you help people deal with stress, but how we help our clinicians deal with the stresses in their lives so that they can provide better services. So it's a common topic, and we are often trying to address it. Many of the things that have been said before today have given you a framework for understanding stress, understanding the physiology, biology of stress. But today, what I'm going to spend my couple of minutes talking about are things that you can do to mediate your stress. And many things that people often focus on are things like exercise, and I've heard somebody even mentioned music already, etc. But there are many, many things that we can do. And so I'm going to try and mention something that I don't know that anybody else is going to mention.
Okay.
There's a text in the Bible, and it's in Proverbs, and it's Proverbs 17:22. And it says, "A joyful heart is good medicine."
Amen.
And I think that in a time of a pandemic where everybody is so stressed out and worried, and the news is so depressing, every day you hear of more and more death and loss, etc., that this idea of a joyful heart and looking for things that bring joy and fun cannot be overlooked, cannot be overstressed. And so one of the things I like to do is I like a good pun. I like a good joke. I like humor. Humor is a really good medicine, and it really can lighten the load. It takes off the stress. You can be redirected when you get a good joke. So I'm going to throw a few out, and they have been, vetted.
They're appropriate.
They're all appropriate, and that's
Okay,
important
thank you.
when you're doing it. But just think about it. I'm going to throw out some jokes and think about how it makes you feel, how it takes you away from the heaviness of whatever it is that you might be dealing with, and redirects you, even just for a small vacation, away from the stresses and the worries of the day. So the first one I'm going to just throw out there is, where was Solomon's temple located? Solomon in the Bible. Where was his temple located?
I feel a lot of pressure right now. We've got to let more people into the chat. What was the answer?
The answer is on each side of his head. Duh. Temples.
Okay. We need to let more people to react to you. I'm just not sure I'm the right person to react to your puns. Okay, the temples. All right. I'm focused. All right.
So next one. A preacher completes a sermon about temperance, and he is really energized and motivated to get over the idea that some of the addictive substances that people use are not good. So he goes on, and he says that if he could get all the beer and the wine and the whiskey in the world, he would throw it into the river and, just get it away from people, because it's responsible for so much of the trouble that we have in this world. So then he comes to the end of his sermon, and the song leader stands up and says cautiously, with a smile on his face, our closing song will be, "Shall we gather at the river?" There you go.
With a straw. With a straw. We'll gather at the river with cups and mugs and straws.
So all I'm saying is that there are many of these. You can go online and find them, and they're just quick little pick-me-ups. They make you laugh. They make you turn around from things. The other thing you can use is, most of us have like a Google Home or an Alexa, what would you call it, speaker at home, and you can ask questions. I'd just like to give you a tip. You can ask Google or Alexa to tell you a joke.
No kidding.
And it tells you jokes. And we often in our house will walk past and say, "Alexa, tell us a joke. Google, tell us a joke." And it comes up with these jokes, and they're usually appropriate. They're not anything that you wouldn't use. So just this idea of bringing laughter and fun into your life, and actively trying to do so, I think can be very healing, very stress reducing. And it's just another way, just another tool to put into your kit of that you need to use to moderate the stresses in your life.
Thank you so much. I'm chuckling, and I really appreciate getting that laughter. It's good medicine, and that's a good way. Thank you. I didn't expect that today, Dr. Wilfred, but we certainly appreciate that, your thoughts, and the ideas that we can laugh, and that will help us with our stress. So we're going to go back to a couple of our other presenters right now to get some of their tips and thoughts. For those of you that are watching online, if you have any thoughts or questions that you'd like to, please put it in the chat. So I'm going to go back to Dr. Rivera. Dr. Rivera, if you're still with us, if you could just kind of give us just a quick wrap up of what your presentation, just a quick few minutes on some tips and tricks, things that you recommend for managing stress.
Well, like I said earlier, different stress management techniques may vary from person to person. So for some people, it may be puns and jokes. For some people, it may be spending time with family. Although sometimes we have spent so much time with family now that we want to have a vacation from them. Maybe spending time taking a walk. Again, the many stress-reducing techniques are literally in the hundreds. I'm just going to talk about two of them that are helpful to me. Weather permitting, one of them is taking walks. Yes. I like going out and take a 20, 30, 40-minute walk and come back. And usually whatever it was worrying me and wearing me down at the beginning of that walk is usually gone by the time I get back. Yeah. The second one is spending time with family and friends, particularly I'm Puerto Rican, so if you're Puerto Rican, you play dominoes. I don't know. At least you know how to.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So a group of us, friends and family, we just gather, we play some dominoes, we laugh, we joke around, we tease each other, in a nice way. But again, by the time we end, a gathering of, I don't know, an hour or two of doing so, we feel so much better. We feel so much relieved. Now,
Sure.
that's what worked for me. I don't know what may work for other people. For
Sure.
other people, it may be breathing exercises. For other people, maybe riding a bike, spending time in prayer. Not that for me, prayer is not good, but when I really want to decompress, yes, I may pray, but I would also go out for a walk. And who says you cannot do both at once, right? Walk
Absolutely.
and pray
Absolutely.
at the same time.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
it all depends what works for you. So I would like to invite all of our audience to experiment, to see what may
Yeah.
work. And if you already know what it is, then to put it into practice intentionally.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We'll go to Dr. Susan Wilford White right now. If she's still with us, if we could go to, maybe not, we'll just, Dr. Susan is not with us. Let's go to Dr. David Sidlachik and get a few. Is Dr. David with us still?
I am.
Thank you so much. I know you did talk with us a little earlier about some of your tips, but if you would just give us a couple of your two or three favorite things that you do that help you with your stress.
Well, what I want to do is talk about stress reduction, not as a tip or something that I do. I really appreciate the ones that have been shared. I do those things myself
Sure.
and really love them. But I want to look at this as a lifestyle.
Okay.
Okay. And why that's so important for me is that I believe that life is filled with stress and it's going to continue to be filled with stress.
Sure.
And so how do I relate to it on an ongoing basis? And a part of it is a mindset for me.
Okay.
It's like, well, let me just share. I have been a first responder. I am a firefighter,
Oh.
and so thinking about that, when there's a fire, I may be required to go into a burning building, not run away from the stressor,
Right.
but go into the stressor. Okay. And the mindset you have is, okay, I'm going into this building and my job is to enter that stressful thing and to put out the fire and to save a life, or if need be, or whatever it may happen to be. And so going in there, you have a mindset of someone who is a responder, someone who's not just a survivor, but someone who's going in to make a big difference. And so what I'm thinking about is this, that as we near the second coming of Jesus, stressors are going to get harder, not easier.
Wow. Okay.
We're going to be living right in it, not as if we're not now, but we're going to be living in it. And so the question that I ask myself in terms of living this lifestyle is, Jesus came and voluntarily chose to come into a stressful world where he knew he was going to suffer. He didn't run from it. He knew he was going to be in it.
Yeah.
And how can I then have the mindset where, Lord, I don't want you always to take stress away, and make my life comfortable, but how can I enter into your world with your presence, lifting me up and carrying me through whatever it is that you permit, and knowing that no matter what the outcome is, that I'm in your arms and that you have me. Now, that for me has been something that has been kind of a different way of thinking about
absolutely.
life that has been very, very helpful for me.
Thank you. You're right. It's a very interesting way, that Jesus asked before the cross that God would take that cup away from him. And that wasn't what was going to happen. But God, the angels ministered to him and God gave him the strength to make it through that situation. And that same strength and energy and love is available to each one of us today. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We appreciate it. Let's go to Dr. Susan Wilford White. And Thank you. Glad to have you back, Dr. Susan. Can you share with us just some of your thoughts here as we wrap up our program?
Sure, thank you. I would love to. I have a few tips for parents, and I think they work for anyone actually. If we can share the slides again, the slides that have the closing information. So we're going to cover three things that I think are important, and they may have been mentioned to some extent already. But we're going to share a little bit about why those things are, in fact, important for us to do. So we can see here 3 closing tips about how to improve our immunity, but they're also going to lower stress. And that's why they're good, because they address both things. They will address both our immunity and they're going to address our stress. So we might need one little click there to move us into the first slide. So if we think about exercise, if we look at our risk of getting a viral infection versus the amount of exercise we do, if we're involved in moderate exercise, we see that our risk of getting an infection is very low. However, that risk goes up if we're sedentary, and it also goes up if we're really intensely active. So that's good news for me, because I'm not a marathon runner. So if you just do moderate exercise, you lower your risk of having a viral infection. Sunlight. We all know that if you get sunlight, it helps you get vitamin D. And we could do a whole series on vitamin D because it's so phenomenal for us. It also acts on our hypothalamus to address our melatonin and our serotonin, which gives us more energy, better moods, and better sleep. And as we're talking about sleep, sleep is the third thing I want to mention, which, boy, I need to take my own advice here.
Yeah.
Studies show that the percentage of people who get colds in a particular study were so much more if you had fewer hours of sleep. So if you got less than 5 hours of sleep, 45% of those people got sick. Whereas if you got more than 6 hours of sleep, only 22% of those people got sick. So definitely sleep is important. So try to avoid being worried sick by trying to sleep well. And I just want to say on that sleep topic, for adults, that's 7 to 8 hours. For kids, for adolescents, it's like 9 to 10 hours. And for younger kids, it's up to 14 hours. So we really need to get that sleep in. And I think that makes a difference, both to our immunity and to our stress levels.
Thank you so much, Dr. Susan. We really appreciate that. I like that one. Sleep more makes you feel better. Love my sleep. Thank you so much. And let's go back to Dr. Sandria Nixon. Any last thoughts for us? Dr. Nixon, are you still with us? Okay. Oh, Nixon, thank you so much. Sorry to catch you unaware. Thank you, Dr. Nixon. If you could just share with us just one of your favorite things to do to reduce stress that we take with us as we leave the program today.
Sure. Just a really quick thing. The one of the main things, if you have an elderly member of your family and you know that they have not received their COVID tests for whatever reason, please seek them out and please do the work for them. That's what, I try to do that. And really quickly, self-care, the proper breathing was mentioned, and distractions, a good movie, whatever that may be. For me, I used to be a marathon runner. I am a retired, so that was my thing that I love to do, to run. So I no longer can do that. I have to get back to my exercise. And Dr. Sedlacek said, things are going to get worse. And I firmly believe that. Pray, pray, pray.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. If we can just put all of our presenters on screen right now. If anyone has any last minute thoughts, Dr. Fisher, anyone has any last minute thoughts? We're going to just about wrap up here. Anyone with a last minute thought? Okay, well, we have had a lot of information shared with us today. Some great head knowledge, as I would say, about how to manage stress, as well as some heart ways as to think about managing stress. I will take away, of course, that I need to laugh more. I don't get jokes, but I'm certainly going to laugh more. Thank you so much, Dr. Carol. And of course, we know that the answers to a lot of our questions include eating right and exercising. Today is a beautiful sunshiny day here in Southwest Michigan, so I think I'm going to take a walk after we're done here today. And I especially appreciated Dr. Sedlacek's way of helping us to reframe our stress and to look at the challenges that we have ahead of us as a way to share in the challenges and the joy that Jesus has for us. As people of faith, we always want to encourage you to pray and to invite God into our life. And what a good way to do that is meditating on the life of Christ. What a good way to reduce our stress. So thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to continue this discussion on health and how we can take care of ourselves better next month, when our health panel discussion is going to cover habits, addictions, and the brain. We did touch on that a little bit today, but we're going to talk about that next month quite a bit more. Saturday afternoon, April 17, again at 3 o'clock. We'll be streaming it live on Facebook and YouTube. And we're going to talk about how from the moment we wake up in the morning, we make choices all day long, and those choices become habits, and in some cases, they become addictions. And although that's challenging at times, we want to do what we need to let go of bad habits, embrace the healthy habits, recover from addictions, and live healthy and resilient lives. Just so you know, April is National Alcohol Awareness Month, and we're going to get a lot more information. We touched on that this month, and we're going to go deeper into it next month. So thank you again so much for joining us. Our prayer is that God will continue to bless you as we manage these challenging times, as we deal with our stress. We know that God wants us to have an abundant life, so we pray that for you. So be blessed and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again to all of our presenters. So much to appreciate seeing you again. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.